Welcome to the Top Order podcast. Three of us in the room. Raj, unfortunately, feeling a little bit under weather, but we are going to be talking the pitch, the toss, the teams, our predictions from Narendra Modi Stadium. 130,000 fans are going to be packed in for this World Cup final. 9:30 New Zealand time, 2 p.m. local. It's a one-off game. The previous records don't count. We're going to discuss all that and more coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned, boys. It's Christmas Eve, isn't it, really? We're sitting here Saturday afternoon in Auckland. The game, obviously, World Cup final. India going in 10 from 10 in this tournament so far after their victory against New Zealand.
Didn't you just say none of that counted?
Well, in the intro, we're going to discuss that, aren't we? We're going to discuss what counts. This is a one-off game of cricket. We've got Australia coming in from, we talked about it on the preview show, didn't we, Baldy? If the Aussie seamers came good, which they were due to do, that new ball triplets. Is it triplet? What's the...
Well, only two of them can bowl at once, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but Starc, Cummins, Hazlewood, certainly Hazlewood bowled really, really well. Starc made a few commentators and pundits eat a little bit of humble pie. I think Ian Healy was online eating a big portion of that after some comments
I had some
made.
leftovers as well,
prior to that game. But look, we're going to talk all of that from, as we said, Modi Stadium. There's going to be 130,000 fans. It's going to be a sea of blue, you would suggest, with maybe only the odd pocket of canary yellow. Where do we want to start? I think let's start in the room. Baldy, Australia in the final. What are your, I guess, thoughts, feelings, emotions riding into this? The bookmakers don't give you a hell of a lot of hope. For those who like the English odds, it's 4-9 on for India, 9-5. I'm going to come to that. Australia 9-5. So in the basic math that we need down in the Southern Hemisphere, that's India paying $1.39 and Australia paying nearly $3.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts, I guess, with all that context going into a World Cup final?
Well, and I want to jump on that because after we recorded our preview or our review of the semi-final, you were very much, this is a free hit. This is, all of that kind of talk of, now we've over-exceeded expectations, but now we're in the final. You want to win this, right? This is now important.
Australians don't go to finals to lose. Yeah. Australians do not go to finals to lose. Look, we're somewhere in between $3 and Lloyd Christmases, so you're telling me there's a chance territory from 1993 Dumb and Dumber, right? Australians don't go to finals to come second. They're up against it, but this is perfect for Australia, Every Australian who is sort of, that sort of dyed in the wool, Reggie Didge, loves the underdog type will be reveling in the fact that it's 130,000 versus 11. And all of the conditions, the ground, the fans, the atmosphere, all week, or 3 or 4 days leading into the final will be all geared towards everything talking about India, which suits Australia down to the ground. I think the less that Australia are built up as being expectations of winning the final, the better for them as a team. I think they'll be galvanised by that, and I think it plays in their favour a little bit. As I said after the semi-final, if we treat it as a free hit, if we go in there without any expectations, if we take all the pressure off ourselves as a side, Australia, particularly guys like Glenn Maxwell and Travis Head, etc., and David Warner, have freedom to operate within a risk-taking environment, whereas if they went in with expectations of winning and all of that kind of weighing them down, then Australia are less likely to perform at their best, I think.
Do you think, I wanted to talk a little bit about the paths for these two teams to the finals, and do you think that the way they've got to this final has sort of, in a way, really helped with all of the stuff that you're talking about now? Because, obviously we have mentioned it quite a few times about how these first two games for Australia went pretty badly.
Didn't play good cricket.
Got absolutely, they were a chance in that India game, take that catch of Kohli, and suddenly this whole World Cup could look completely different. But they got thumped by South Africa. And even in that third game, Sri Lanka was 120 for none, looking like they're about to put Australia out of this World Cup. But they've suddenly got on a roll, like they've managed to sort of win some games where, not that it didn't seem like they were going to, but some close games, and certainly the Maxwell game, obviously, against Afghanistan. It's sort of all now put them, like now they're on a roll, and now they can kind of carry this underdog tag that they've had, which is really unlike them in a World Cup.
Australia will get a lot of mental strength out of the games that they've won in this World Cup. So if you mentioned the Maxwell game where we were 90 for 7 chasing lots and he got 200, even the Bangladesh game, the following game where Australia were in a little bit of trouble. Bangladesh made 306, I think, or whatever it was. You know, we had to break records to win those two games in terms of highest scores chased. It was a close game against South Africa. I may have talked up that it was a little bit more comfortable than perhaps many Australians felt in that chase against South Africa. So Australia will have been steeled by having must-win games or close to must-win games that they were able to find a way to get over the line, and that will stand them in very good stead against India. I don't think Australia will go in fearing India at all. I think some sides have gone into this World Cup fearing how strong they look on paper and how wonderfully well balanced they are and how well they've been performing. I don't think Australia will go in fearing India, but I think in Baldy's keys to victory later on, I think Australia need to take some learnings out of the way that other teams have played against India and maybe take a different approach.
Stu, let's put ourselves, I guess, for a second in the Indian camp. How are they feeling going into this? And I think to build on Baldy's point, when I look at Australian sides and you kind of look at that list of World Cups, and you feature in a lot of finals over the history of the World Cup, particularly in the ODI format. And there's been numerous occasions where you've had a number of must-win games to get to those stages. I think probably the difference I see in terms of that preparation is that you needed to win those games, but there was still probably questions on who else was going to make the finals at that point.
Yep.
Whereas this is a slightly different scenario. Is you've had a number of must-win games. India haven't had to win a game for about 3 weeks, really, in terms of the tournament. You know, they obviously pretty much first to qualify, even though they weren't first to play in the course of the tournament. They're, as we said, 10 from 10. Baldy says, Australia won't fear India. What do you think India are thinking at the moment in terms of that, their build-up and preparation and how they're feeling playing at home? 130,000 fans. We've talked about the pressure that's on them, but what your view on what they're thinking in that camp?
I hope they, and don't take this the wrong way, but I hope that they feel unbeatable. I honestly think that they should. Like there's that fine line, isn't there, between feeling unbeatable and being, too overconfident. But I think they could quite easily be on the line of, we are unbeatable, and you're going to have to play unbelievably well to beat us. And we have so many strings to our bow. We have, if we bat well, you're out of the game. If we bowl well, and that thing that Raj said, the comment that Raj made, and very early on in this tournament, has stuck with me throughout, and they just keep doing it over and over again, and they keep smashing teams. You look at this road to the final, they just keep thumping, loads
good
and loads,
sides.
Very good sides, yeah. And they, even the margins of victory, even in the games that became sort of close, like the New Zealand games. And I think you touched on it just before. I think we should unpack a little bit probably the Australia game and the 2 New Zealand games that India have played. They're probably the 2 games where they've looked the most in danger. But then you look at those margins of victory, and India won by 5 wickets against New Zealand with plenty of time to spare. They won by 70 runs the other night in the semi-final, and they won by 6 wickets or something against 7 wickets against Australia. So the margins of victory in the games that we felt were close at times were still quite big. And I feel like they should go in. I know it's at home, but they seem to be enjoying that, and they should go in feeling like they cannot lose this game unless they do something terrible.
I read a stat earlier in the week that this is on par, this Indian side in terms of margins of victory on average is on par with that Australian side in 2007 in terms of the winning by wickets, winning by runs, etc., winning with overs to spare, on par with the dominance of that Australian side in 2007. So they've been certainly far and away the best side in the tournament so far, but this all comes down to 100 overs. It comes down to one game on one day and who takes that opportunity the best. I think you're right though, Stuart. For Australia to win the game, we will have to play at our absolute best with bat and ball. I think if India master either of their 2 disciplines, they will go a long way to winning the game, even if the other side of the coin is maybe not at their peak.
Yeah. I think the thing that's noticeable for me is that India really, from an outsider obviously watching, look as if they've really enjoyed this tournament. It looks as if they probably haven't felt or certainly outwardly, they haven't sort of demonstrated that they're feeling the pressure of a billion people and hundreds of thousands of fans in the grounds. And I think a lot of that comes from the calmness that we see from Rohit Sharma at the top of the order, and obviously with the captain's armband on. But then also even Virat Kohli, he's very, very emotional. But he seemed, yes, he still had that passion, absolutely. But it's also been with that kind of ice cool blood running through his veins when it's really mattered. And I think we talk a lot about being put under pressure throughout the course of a tournament and the margins of victory. India, have had a relatively straightforward run to the final, but I still think they've been in some situations where they have had to stand up. They have had to absorb some pressure. You look at, even just things like the strike rates, that there's been times when they have had to, just actually absorb pressure and keep themselves in a game. But I think most importantly, when you look at their top 5 or their top 6, strike rates are all great, but also from an average perspective, they've got 6 guys averaging over 50 in this tournament. And when you think really they've played this format of 5 genuine batters, they've obviously had the luxury of someone like Ravi Jadeja being able to play as a genuine all-rounder. But 6 genuine batters and 5 genuine bowlers. I just think when you look at those stats and then you come and look at their bowling stats where you've got 5 guys under 25 bowling average, it's a pretty formidable side. Let's move on to the teams. What do we think in terms of selections? I've kind of written down what I think it looks like. There's been a little bit of chat around whether Ravi Ashwin gets a look in. I can't see that myself, having played only one game. It looks as if really Ashwin, Krishna, Thakur and Kishan, the reserve keeper, are the 4 to miss out, and they just go same team, do the same again. But any potential curveballs you can see India from a selection perspective, either of you?
Not from India, surely. I mean, they've been so successful in this tournament. After the Hardik injury, whether they stumbled on this because of that injury or whether that was always sort of in their plans to sort of bring in Shami and just keep Hardik in the Surya Kumar Yadav role at the moment, sort of batting 6 and being a 6th bowler and having even more balance to their side. Maybe that was where they would have ended up anyway. But having come to that format, I don't see, why they would need to try and change things up. They've just been going so well, but also, what would be the benefit in trying to do that unless they think the pitch is going to be absolutely, a real Bunsen burner.
Yeah, if it's a raging turner, then the ICC haven't done the best service by the 130,000 fans who've come to watch a good game of cricket, right?
Yeah.
You want a good surface that has contest between bat and ball, sure, but if it's going to be a raging turner, yes, India will pick 3 spinners and Australia will find it very, very difficult to score runs. I think Australia already find it difficult to score runs against genuinely good spin.
And I've got that as a question a little bit later on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't think India should make a change to their side. I think they've got a perfectly well-balanced cricket side as it is, and if you have a look at what they've got 3 very, very good seam bowlers. One of them is quite clearly the best in the tournament in Mohammad Shami.
Yeah.
They've got Jadeja, who's fantastic. They've got Kuldeep, who's been doing good things. So why would you change that balance? Why would you change that formula? I certainly wouldn't. I'd roll the same team out and go, come and beat us.
Let's roll on to Australia then, and I think let's cover the pitch conversation. I think we obviously saw some chat prior to the semi-finals. It really didn't transpire that there was anything wrong with that wicket.
Good surface.
And look, I think the reality is we talk about used pitches, we talk about fresh pitches. The reality is quite often one-day pitches get used multiple times. They can be refreshed relatively easily. I don't think we're going to see a Bunsen burner. I think we're going to see a good wicket because I think this is, the pinnacle. This is the world stage. I can't see any decision being made deliberately that the pitch is going to be anything other than a one-day international belter. Why would you?
No, it doesn't play into India's hands to have a raging turner of a wicket in this particular scenario.
On that though, we did see 2 very contrasting sort of conditions and surfaces in those 2 semi-finals. We saw, in the New Zealand game at the Wankhede, we saw, just an absolute road with no movement at all. Only, the Indian bowlers got it to swing in that power play under lights for a very short amount of time. time. And then at Eden Gardens, we saw quite a different pitch, didn't we? Where there was movement for those Australian seamers up front. There was, a bit in the pitch, and we really enjoyed it. That sort of, it felt like quite a good balance between bat and ball. If you look at Ahmedabad, the sort of not necessarily the pitches that have been there, but the scores that we've seen, we haven't seen anything. It's been 4 games there. We haven't seen anything over 300 so far in this tournament at Ahmedabad. So potentially, we're just guessing, right, sitting here in Auckland about what the conditions and pitch might be. But potentially we might be looking closer to 300 as a good score rather than you're going to have to get 400 to win this game.
Yeah, and if you look at the stats that Opta pull together, that's very much their suggestion. So they've, I don't know how their algorithm works. Baldy might know better than me, but ultimately they're saying, assuming the team that wins the toss does what they want to do, they think it's relatively even in terms of what the scores are going to be in the first innings, and they're pitching it's going to be around that 300 marker for a first innings score.
Yep.
I think to your point around the game where it did do a little bit for Australia, I think the overheads came into that as much as the pitch conditions potentially. It was pretty gloomy. The lights were obviously on early.
And it had been undercover for a while, right? And a little bit of juice in it.
And it had been undercover. So, look, we don't know what the weather's going to do. It sounds as if it's set fair, which I think obviously is what we want. We want it to be set fair and we want it to be as flat as it can be. Let's come on to the Australian team. Or do you want to rebut on the flatness? You want to see a genuine cricket wicket, do you, Baldy?
Look,
not going to happen.
It's
going to be flat.
It's not going to happen. It's going to be flat. Look, for Australia, one of the things that would help Australia a little bit is if it did have a little bit of seam movement. Australia looked like a completely different attack in that semi-final when the ball moved off the wicket. Josh Hazlewood was best in the world when he looked like he has been for a while the number 1 ranked ODI bowler, because he got a little bit of movement off the seam and he beat the outside and the inside edge of the bat, 2 for 12 off 8 overs. We're not going to get that again. So put that thought away, boys. But that would be great. Yeah. If I can ask for anything, for Christmas, can I ask for a little bit of seam movement when we bowl?
Well, I think if you ask for that little bit of seam movement, it might not be the Christmas present you want. Because again, if I look at some stats, highest false shot percentage of seamers in this tournament, both Shami and Bumrah, 34%. So ahead of both of your opening bowlers.
Yeah,
so
that's probably fair.
If there is a little bit of nip there, and we've talked about it, if there is a little bit of nip there, Shami's the man
he's definitely the man
to find it.
He's the best.
What about that Aussie team though, Baldy? Are we likely to see any changes from the semi-final? I mean, I know you've sort of before that semi, a lot of the question mark was around, do they go with sort of Marnus in that number 5 spot, or do they go with another all-rounder, Stoinis? Personally, I think Marnus has become too important in the field to actually drop him now. Like, regardless of what's going on, he's been so crucial in the last couple of games, in particular, in what he's been doing in that inner ring and then on the boundary once he ends up there later. I again wouldn't even think about making a change.
I mean, you've got a permutation really where you've got Stoinis, you've got Maxwell, and you've got Labuschagne, and you've got to get 3 of those 2 in, haven't you?
Yeah,
that's basically
Maxwell
comes in.
Maxwell's a lock, 100%. Maxwell's a lock, and I would at this point, if Marnus can put his reverse sweep away, I would be picking Marnus, because as you say, he is such an asset in the field. Stoinis is a good fielder. He's a very, very strong throw, good across the ground, good catcher. South Africa game in the group stage notwithstanding, because he dropped a goober at cover. But I think you're right, Stuart. He is such a dynamic fielder. We saw it in the Bangladesh game. He got 2 runouts. That's the same as getting 2 as a bowler.
Yep.
And in the semi-final, he and Warner in those offside positions, as you said to me last Saturday, you need to claim as a fielder 25% of a wicket you take when you're stopping boundaries, or in your case when you're in the ear of the batter and get him to change his mind and hit one deep down square leg's throat. So for Australia,
let's be honest, that's nothing to do with any fielding ability though, Baldy.
No, that was just good chirp from you. I just needed to give you credit on the pod for that dismissal, because I didn't at the time. No, Australia do need Marnus in the field. If we're going to be a chance against India, we have to build pressure by restricting as well as being aggressive in terms of trying to take wickets. I don't think Australia can sit in against India as we did in the Ashes against England at stages and wait for a mistake, because on a good batting surface with the side that's that good and the form that all of those guys are in that you mentioned, we're not going to get 10 mistakes. We might get 1 or 2 across 50 overs.
That's what New Zealand got stuck doing. They were waiting in that semi-final for India to make a mistake, and they just didn't.
We can't wait for that.
Can I ask a question, Baldy, of that selection? And look, I absolutely agree. I think that's the route that they're going to go. I think they're going to obviously go Maxwell, and I think obviously he helps in terms of your strike rate. Is there any concern though when you look at the fact that Warner, we've talked a lot about his impact, but he's striking at just over 100 in this tournament so far. You've then got Travis Head at somewhere around about 140 strike rate. Smith and Labuschagne both between 75 and 81, particularly in those potentially middle overs against spin.
Yes.
We've seen them potentially get a little bit bogged down, I think. Is that a concern for you that there's a scenario where the way your batting lineup looks like you are a little bit stodgy in that 3-4 spot without maybe looking at a Stoinis to supplement a Maxwell?
Yes, and I think it all comes down to the approach Mitchell Marsh takes and whether or not he decides that he's going to be the aggressor, and we're going to see Mitchell Marsh as we saw him against Bangladesh, i.e. I'm going to take on the bowling, I'm going to hit the ball long down the ground, I'm going to hit the ball hard. If we get Afghanistan game Mitchell Marsh, or the Mitchell Marsh that hasn't been aggressive batting at 3, particularly after the power play, if he comes in over 11, 12, 15, whatever, and he's got Kuldeep first up, he's got Jadeja first up, he needs to be aggressive against those guys. Otherwise, if he gets bogged down, then it becomes harder for Marnus, it becomes harder for Smith to accelerate in those middle overs. I think we've got enough firepower. One of the notes that I made going into this show was none of those Australian batters that you've mentioned can win us the game in the first 20 balls that they face against spin, but collectively they can lose the game in the first 20 balls that they face against spin. So we do need to be a little bit patient against Jadeja in particularly. I would like to see Australia go after Kuldeep a little bit, as we did, I think, in that first game, if I recall, and other sides have gone after him a little bit as well. Siraj and Kuldeep are the two guys that I think Australia can get after in the power play and middle overs respectively, because if they've only got 5 bowlers, if we can take some overs out of those and have to get them to bowl a 6th option, then that works in our favour. So I think we do need to be aggressive against those guys, Marsh in particular.
Yeah, I think as we're now transitioning into like the key matchups of this game, I do think, you mentioned Siraj. I think it would take a lot for a 6th bowler to come into the mix. I honestly think it'll be an injury. It will be the only way that India will not just say, even if one of these bowlers is getting smashed, they're still a better option than Virat Kohli or whoever is potentially going to be that 6th bowler. But you saw, that this Indian seam attack has been so good. But I think in that New Zealand game where, yes, it was an absolute road, after the first few overs from Siraj, New Zealand did make a clear point to try and attack him, and he's an emotional bowler. He's a fantastic bowler, but he got wound up, particularly against Daryl Mitchell. He started bouncing him and all of this sort of stuff, and you could see in his head that he was going, I want to win this battle, and in trying to win the battle, he sort of let Daryl Mitchell get underway and get going, and exactly, I would be thinking that Australia are going, okay, well, Shami's just been unstoppable, Bumrah is all class, and the way he kind of operates makes it so hard to get on top of him, because of he can bowl that Yorker, he can bowl the cutters, he can bowl in so many different ways. I think Siraj is definitely the seamer that you're looking to go after.
I think you've got to disrupt Siraj. It's not about going into your shell against Shami, going into your shell against Bumrah, but I think Australia have an opportunity to disrupt the line and length of Siraj in the same way that we tried to take the opportunity to disrupt Marco Jansen in the semi-final against South Africa. That's the mentality that I think Travis Head in particular will take into this game. If Warner gets width, we know what he's going to do, but Travis Head to me is the guy who can take on Siraj, particularly if after 3 or 4 overs the movement tends to wear away a bit. If you can line him up straight up and down and hit it on the top of the bounce, that's the way forward.
Not to dominate this conversation too much, but now that we're on the openers as well, what I think New Zealand did really well, or have done reasonably well in both of their 2 games, even though they did lose 2 early wickets in that semi-final, was I think to actually trouble this Indian lineup, you've got to survive those first 10 overs. Not in the sense of, you have to sit there and block it out. But if they, like when we've seen them destroy sides, they've knocked over 3 or 4 in that power play, and it's just game over. Like it's all over. It's all over from there, because the spinners can come on and take advantage. Travis Head, Marsh, and Warner, their natural instinct is to go hard at these bowlers, and if they go hard at these bowlers, there's obviously the risk that they're 3 down after set. Like, how do you think Australia's going to be balancing that out? Are they going to say, like you said before, we want to just get on top of these guys and we're prepared to kind of go down fighting, or do you think that there is some level of there going, hold on, shall we get to the 10 overs only 1 or 2 down and think, from there we can start to build?
Yeah, before you go to Baldy, I've got a little bit of a take on this. I think what we've seen from David Warner throughout the course of this tournament is that, realistically, I think, Baldy, you said on one of the last pods that Mitch Marsh would probably prefer to open the batting. And then obviously you've got Warner, and Head's come back in, and, Head had to come back in really with the form that he's shown over the course of the last 18 months or so. Warner actually has absorbed a lot of that pressure and has actually played, I think, really, really sensibly, and has been prepared to bat in a sort of almost test match style for a period of time if he needs to. You've actually seen him leave a few balls. You've seen him hit the sweeper when he's needed to hit the sweeper. So I think in terms of your comment, I think that's exactly what David Warner's role is going to be at the top of that order. If there is the ability to play probably the way that he played when he first came onto the scene, and even maybe 3 or 4 years ago, he's got that gear, but he's also shown that he knows that probably if he looks at himself and Travis Head and Mitchell Marsh, he is the guy that might just need to play that Roy Keane role and hold in midfield for a little while and let the Galacticos go after it on the right and left wing.
I'm 100% with you. I'm 100% with you. He is so crucial to Australia because he allows Head, he allows Marsh, he allows Maxwell later on in the day to take a little bit of risk. So if he's 40 off 60, I think he's done a terrific job, honestly, in those first 20 overs, because if he's 40 off 60, it means wickets aren't falling at both ends. Yeah. And if they can establish some partnerships, Head and Marsh in particular, I think Australia are in with a fighting chance of putting up a big score, and I think that's going to be crucial for Australia. Make India bat second.
Give us another key matchup, Binksy. What do you think?
Yeah, so I actually think that there's a matchup which is that, and look, I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit, but the matchup that I wanted to ask Baldy a hell of a lot about was that spin matchup against Smith, Labuschagne and probably Maxwell. We saw Maxwell line up in the South Africa game, a big heave and put the team under pressure. You talked a little bit about Labuschagne at times has had to go to that sweep to try and get himself off strike because he doesn't seem to have another game plan at times. So I think that Ravi Jadeja and Kuldeep against those, particularly those two, I think if you've got Smith and or Labuschagne batting together, I think that could be the match, particularly in those middle overs.
Yeah, Australia have to target one of those two spinners, I think, to try and either milk them for 6, 7 and over, or really go after one of the two. I think they'll target Kuldeep because most of the Australian batters are right-handed. Warner and Head, the exceptions, if I'm right. Yeah, Warner and Head, the exceptions in the top 7. So I think Australia will target Kuldeep and try and get as many off him as they can, because they can't be tied down by Jadeja and Kuldeep and Shami. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to pick your poison to a certain extent there, and I think Australia will target Kuldeep, and I think that's the right matchup for them. Australia can't get tied down by the wicket-to-wicket bowling of Jadeja. They're going to have to find a way to work him for one so that he doesn't bowl Mitchell Santner style 10 overs 1 for 35. I think Australia would still take that, to be fair, off of Jadeja if they can get Kuldeep for 55, 60 off his 10.
Well, and it depends on all the stuff we were talking about before, right? Like, what's a good score? Like, if they can go, okay, well, 280 is a good score on the surface, then yeah, maybe they can. Maybe actually having Smith and Labuschagne to say, look, we're just going to take 45 or 50 off both of these two, and we're going to leave, the big hitting to some of the other guys at the end there. Hopefully for their case, Warner and Head have got them off to a little, maybe 60 off that power play. Marsh, Smith and Labuschagne can kind of milk those spinners, get them to the point where, Maxwell can kind of go hard at the end. Potentially that is the game plan, and they don't have to go as hard.
I think the key for Australia, though, in those three that you've mentioned there in the middle overs, if they get in they have to make the best of that opportunity, because I think Jadeja in particular, as well as anyone in world cricket, makes it really hard to start against him, because he bowls so many probing deliveries at you, makes you play, makes you make decisions off the, if he challenges both edges of your bat early in your innings. So I think Australia, if one of those guys can get in, the partnerships that they bat in become super important, because as we've seen with Australia in the past, touch wood, there is a collapse in that middle order, against spin, and Australia have on occasion struggled against spin. So I think that's the weakness for Australia. That matchup that you mentioned, Adam, is one that I think India would target. And if I was India, I'd target the other way around too. I'd target Zampa, because South Africa did a terrific job targeting what has been, to this point, Australia's best bowler in the group stage. And South Africa made him look out of form in that game.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, but then I kind of looked back at the previous two games, and he went for 3 and over against Bangladesh in the previous game, and bowled well in the game before that as well. So I think conditions favoured, I think, the seamers, certainly in Eden Gardens for that semi-final. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that there's going to be any worries in that Australian camp about Adam Zampa and his big match temperament.
I don't think so.
He's had a fantastic tournament.
He has, but South Africa batted really, really well in partnership against him, and I think India are well poised to be able to do the same.
I wrote down in my little notes about what the key matchups are. Whether it actually is real or not, I think the Zampa v Kohli battle will be interesting. You sort of there's always talk of Virat Kohli struggles against leg spinners. I have no actual stats, or no idea.
He doesn't
about
struggle
this.
against anybody.
It doesn't appear to be struggling against anyone at the moment.
There isn't a stat that suggests.
But I think that Australia might be tempted as soon as Kohli comes in, or early on in his innings, to go, okay, let's bowl Zampa at him now, put him under a bit of pressure, because he might be less likely to take a risk against Zampa than some of these other batters around Virat Kohli in the lineup, and they might think certainly that wrong. And look, I think it'll be something that they'll try, and how that goes. Obviously, if they can get Kohli early, it'll be huge.
Isn't it fascinating that you could talk about almost any permutation of any of any of the 11 in either side, and it's a juicy matchup? Up and down this entire list of both sides, there are just fantastic, fascinating matchups, and it is going to be, I think, I hope it becomes one of the great World Cup finals, because on paper there's just so much to like about how these two teams match up against each other.
Yeah, so Virat Kohli against leg spin since 2020, 697 runs at an average just a tick under 50, and a strike rate.
That's lower than his normal average.
A strike rate of 108, which is a full 18 points above his tournament strike rate. So there you go.
Okay, very good.
Again, it is, it's tantalising when we look at all of these things and we look at the quality that's on show. It's going to be really, really fine margins, I think, in terms of some of the matchups particularly. But I'm looking down the stat sheet here. Baldy, we're going to come to predictions in a minute, but we look at strike rates, India have got you covered. We look at bowling averages, India have got you covered. We look at hundreds and 50s in the tournaments. India have got you covered. Where is the chink in the armour that you're gonna exploit?
Oh, there isn't one. I don't really think there is one. I think Australia will have to play out of their skin to win the match. They will have to not play the match on paper in their heads beforehand. If Australia play this match on paper and play it by the statistics and by the analysis and all that kind of stuff, Australia can't beat India, based on those figures that you put out. And if you have a look at the analysts and all the rest of it, Australia can't beat India. Australia can beat India by putting all of that behind them and going out and being aggressive against India and putting doubt in the minds of those players that haven't won a World Cup before, haven't necessarily been to the heady heights of tournament success. Australia need to do what New Zealand are so good at doing to other international sides, is drag them out of India's comfort zone and into unknown territory. And that's where Australia, with their 6 or 7 previous World Cup winners in their squad or in their team on game day, will be able to have a little bit of a mental edge. The reality, though, is that there are so many big game players for India. I think Australia are going to have to put them a long way out of their comfort zone for India to have any kind of mental doubt as to whether or not they can get over that that hurdle. And I mean, that is a thing in finals, right? It is a thing in finals to be able to know that you can do the job required of you to win the game. Australia can't win the game unless all 11 players in their team are able to cross that hurdle together. We can't beat India with one guy, standing up and playing a lone hand. India can probably afford that, a Kohli, a Shami or whatever. They can have one guy stand up and potentially win them the match, but there can't be any weakness in that Australian performance in any discipline, in the field, in their catching, bowling, batting, whatever. Australia all need to be at their absolute best to be any chance of beating India.
The one that we haven't talked about that I did want to highlight again and kind of stand by my comments that I made before the New Zealand semi-final, I really do think Rohit is just so crucial to this Indian lineup, and talking about all the confidence and everything. The way that he is able to set that tone, particularly against this Australian seam attack, who, yes, had all these challenges up, earlier on in the tournament, but came good in that semi-final. That matchup, those first 10 overs, particularly if India bat first, the way that 10 overs goes, I think it's just going to be so crucial to the way that the whole game goes. Isn't
it funny that in 2023 we can sit here and go, actually, it's not even the first 10 overs. It's the first 5 overs. I know. It really is. If Rohit is 45 off 24 balls. He was 44 against South Africa in that game. And he took the game away from South Africa inside those first 24 balls that he faced, right? Yeah. Inside the first 6 overs.
It was about the same against New Zealand.
So he can take a game away from you in the space of the first 5 overs of the match. And Australia need to be able to... I think that Australia have got to attack him, right? If we sit in against Rohit... he can clear the boundary. I think Australia have to attack. They have to take a risk to get his wicket. If we sit in against these guys and wait for a mistake, we're just not going to get... we're not going to get 10 mistakes against this Indian batting lineup. We have to take 6 wickets. If Australia can take 6 wickets in the first 25 overs, Australia will be more than 50% of the way towards winning the match, because all of a sudden you've exposed the final 4 batters for India that haven't been exposed yet in this tournament. Without doing that, Australia cannot restrict India enough that we can chase down those runs.
Look, it sounds pretty simple, right? But I think that wickets at the top of that order are going to be really, really key for Australia, because not only can Rohit and others take it away in that first 6-7 overs, if they don't, they can still do it through the middle part of the game as well.
Or the end.
Because they've got that ability. Pretty much every single player. We talked a hell of a lot about Rohit Sharma as, is he the best 3 format batter in the world? But that was probably a couple of years ago we're having those conversations. But he's got all of the gears to actually put in a scenario where, I think if I look at his top score in ODIs, it's 264. He's got the ability to bat a long period of time. He's got the ability to soak up pressure and use his test match skills. And I think he's really just been I guess he's epitomised the coolness in that side. And probably almost, I think, and look, this is not trying to get England into the podcast. You try and get New Zealand into everyone. So I don't feel
they played India in the last game.
I don't feel too bad about it. Therefore, but there's a little bit of that kind of selfless nature about the way that Indian batting lineup is going about their work that reminds me of that England team that were so good because they knew their role so well, and they were given the freedom and the ability to go out and play the way that was going to benefit the team.
And like that England side, this Indian side have so much depth that they can afford to take risks because they trust the guy behind him. Rohit and Virat trust the guys coming behind them to be able to do the job. We haven't mentioned Shubman Gill yet, who's quietly, low-key had a brilliant tournament and is an absolute superstar. Shreyas Iyer's got...
he just got 100 off 70 balls.
Just got 100. Yeah. KL Rahul's got at least 100 in this game. Sky is a proven match winner at many levels.
And has been quiet through this tournament as well. He could potentially explode, couldn't he?
And then you've got Ravindra Jadeja, who's a world-class finisher. So, like I say, Australia have to take 5 or 6 wickets in that first 25 overs because even those unheralded guys are able to take the game away from Australia.
Well, and I think you were spot on to point out that first 5 overs is so crucial, because I actually sent a mate while I was sitting there, I watched the first over of that New Zealand game, and I sent a mate, we have to get Rohit in the first 5 overs here, otherwise it's game over.
Yep.
And it felt like that, because he took the game away from New Zealand, and I think New Zealand were probably 2 or 3 overs late to actually react and start going to cutters or going to, so you say Australia is going to have to attack, they're going to have to be smart, I think is more the key factor, because you can go all out attack, but what does that mean? You can try and put 2 slips in, you can do whatever, like you can on paper look like you're attacking, but they actually have to be smart and be calculated. And I think New Zealand at times got stuck into the way that Rohit just came down the wicket and started dominating. They got to the point very quickly of, what do we do here? We're just going to have to try and bowl and hope that he makes a mistake. And as we've said lots of times here, you can't just do that.
Yeah, being aggressive on the cricket field doesn't just mean you're trying to nick guys out all the time. What it means is you're looking for a way to take wickets that doesn't involve waiting for a batter to make a mistake. So whether that's taking pace off the ball, whether that's using your spinners to vary the pace or vary angle, whether that's taking the cutter or trying to wobble the seam or trying to bowl seam upright, it's giving a batter, asking them different questions, trying to take his wicket rather than waiting for him to miss Q1 and being caught on the boundary or some other similar mistake.
Absolutely. Is it time to move on to predictions?
I think
so. Yeah, Baldy, it's tantalising. I just look at these stats. There's 3 guys in that Indian lineup who have had 10 knocks in the tournament and are averaging over 75.
It's unbelievable.
If you extend that out to 50, there's 4 guys that average over 55.
And I think there's 2 bowlers that average under 10.
It's
unbelievable.
It's insane. So let's go predictions. We're going to go with 2 predictions. So that doesn't mean you can pick both teams to win.
Okay.
But who do you think is going to win, and who do you want to win? And obviously, I think Baldy's is hopefully his want to win is going to be Australia. But Lippy,
it's India for both for me, because I just think, I don't know, I've been doing a bit of thinking. I mean, one, India to win the game for all the reasons we've said, and I think that they should go into the game absolutely supremely confident, and I think that they should go out and dominate this game. Australia, I give them huge amount of credit for the way they've come back and into this tournament, and the way they've kind of got on a roll, and they've, even like the Maxwell innings, that was amazing to watch, and they've actually built into this tournament in a way that gives you sort of that fairy tale feel. But India's just been so good, and I think that they, we talked last time, right, in our semi-final, or in our sort of semi-final previews, we talked a bit about what do we want from a tournament, and I've been battling with that almost ever since. Like, what should there actually be more knockout games in this thing, because we've got to this format, we've played 45 games, and suddenly we've got two knockout games and then one final, and you sort of feel like that knockout part, which is such a crucial part of World Cups, is almost, is such a small focus of the tournament. But then there's the other hand, where we said before, you play all these games and you want to make sure the best team wins. So I still am battling with that in my head. But I've loved watching India in this tournament. I think that they've been fantastic. The way that their batters, the bowlers, everyone has just, you mentioned it before, they've been smiling a lot in this tournament. I think it'd be great. The crowd, everything would just be awesome if India wins. And I'm very happy, very comfortable. A lot of neutrals don't like India, BCCI and all this stuff, the money that they have and things. But look, I think they've been fantastic, and I'd be very happy to see them celebrating on Monday morning New Zealand time.
Yeah, look, I've reflected a little bit of this over the course of the last few days, and I think where some of that, I guess animosity comes from, but particularly on Twitter, or X as it's known now, and social media, I think that angst and that, I think, comes towards the BCCI, not towards the Indian cricket team. And I think for me, if India had been winning throughout this tournament, playing like Arsenal, I wouldn't have wanted
them. What kind of a comment is that?
So
what are we doing here? We're bringing them into the podcast for.
Yeah, so look, where I'm going is, I think if they'd have played, boring, clinical, 1-0 win type cricket, park the bus, like Arsenal did for a period of time, I don't think I'd want them to win. But I think they've played like Man United for me. They've entertained every single...
Not playing like Man United are at the moment.
No. I'm talking about back in the heyday, back when football was a likeable sport. So, I think they've played with that smile on their face. I think they're a likeable team. I think you listen to them speak. That they're great ambassadors for the game. That the vast majority of the guys, I've almost got that sort of respect that I had for Ricky Ponting begrudgingly by the end of his career. I've got that for Virat Kohli. So I think going 10 from 10. I know that isn't the way that finals cricket works. This is a reset, and if Australia win, there's no doubt in saying they'll deserve to win the trophy on the night if they do that. But I just think India have played such fantastic cricket. It's been a fantastic advertisement for the game of cricket over the course of the last 7 or 8 weeks, and I wouldn't want to take anything away from that team. So I think they will win for all the statistical reasons that we've talked about, and B, I'd like to see them win against Australia, and that's not just because I'm English and I have to support England and whoever Australia are playing against.
Yeah,
Baldy,
hello. Look, as I often say to my kids, whether or not you believe that you're going to succeed, you'll be right. And so I think Australia have to go in believing that they're going to succeed against India, and I believe that they will as well. I think Australia will win the game and win the World Cup. I'd love for them to win the World Cup. But if India win, it will be the crowning achievement of what has been one of the most dominant performances in World Cup history, I think we would have to say. If India, repeat the 1972 Miami Dolphins, I think it was. I was researching before the podcast.
Okay. And I'm getting grief for going back to 1990s Man United. We've got 1972 Miami Dolphins here.
Yeah, so I think it's if my memory is correct, I think it's the last time any NFL team ran the slate and won 17-0. Famously, the Patriots went 16-0 and lost the Super Bowl in 07. Anyway, I was looking up perfect records earlier.
Yeah.
Anyway, if India were to do that, I think it would be the crowning achievement of one of the greatest World Cup performances we've ever seen. But I believe Australia can win, and I'll be barracking for Australia to win, of course, on Sunday night.
Can I just say, if Australia do win, this will be a pretty remarkable 12 months or, even 18 months for them. They've won the World Test Championship. They won the T20 World Cup not that long ago. And we sort of had another T20 World Cup since then, but it still wasn't actually that long ago in terms of timing. And if they do win this tournament here, it will be very impressive. And it's not actually very easy these days to be good at all formats at the same time. And I think that is probably something that needs to be recognised for both of these two sides who, we are seeing a repeat of the World Test Championship final. So
absolutely.
Very impressive for both of them, regardless of, the hate that they may take as cricket sides and cricket nations.
Yeah, absolutely. These two teams have been at the pinnacle of their achievement, I guess, if you like, over the last 12 months. India backed by tremendous dominance. Australia through managing to find ways for one or two individuals to have standout performances when it's needed most. And I think that's what Australia will rely on in this game, is they'll find a way to get themselves into a position where they can win the game. And, we've seen them ice games in this World Cup in the past. So, yeah, that's what I'm hoping for Sunday night. But it wouldn't upset me tremendously if India were to win, because they've been so dominant so far in this tournament. I'll try and be magnanimous. Touch wood. I've touched wood about 55 times in the course of this podcast. Anyone on YouTube will just see me just gently touching wood.
Is it wood?
This is made of tin. It's real wood. And most importantly is that if you touch here, there's no varnish to get in the way. So if you're going to touch wood, you can't touch wood with plastic over the top of it.
I'm pretty sure I waxed that, actually.
Not underneath the surface of the table.
Oh, underneath. Yeah. No, you're right, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I can start to see a few nerves in your face now, actually.
I am nervous. I absolutely am. Absolutely.
It's good. It's good. I like it. Good luck to you, Baldy.
There's something
for you.
I
hope they do win. But
I'm emotionally invested in this game.
Yeah, good.
Awesome. And Lippy, you're going to be up to watch this one as well, or do you get your full 8 hours beauty sleep when New Zealand aren't playing?
I'll be trying to watch as much as possible. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, guys, Baldy, you'll probably have a different wish than me. I hope it's a cracking final. I hope it's a real arse nipper. So that we've got that 300 plays, 298 or something like that. That would be absolutely sensational. I think the tournament, I think, deserves that, because we have seen some fantastic cricket. We haven't seen a lot of close games throughout the course of the tournament. So I think it'd be great if we see a close one in this final. But yeah, top order pod. We're going 2-1 in terms of our predictions. 2 for India. 1, the heart and the head both going with the green and gold of Australia. But you'll find out on Sunday night who lifts the trophy. For now, it is good night and God bless from us here in Auckland. We will be back, obviously, in your feeds with a wrap-up of the final the morning after the final, and then back to our normal This Week in Cricket. And then we've got plenty more cricket coming up as well.
These guys play again 4 days later.
India play again 4 days later. We've got a test series coming up, India versus England, not too far away. So plenty more cricket on the Top Order podcast. We haven't even spoken about the New Zealand domestic game, and there's 17 rounds into the Plunket Shield already.
There's teams being suspended from international cricket that aren't even making our This Week in Cricket at the moment. So there's heaps happening in the world.
We will have a wrap up where we'll talk all that cricketing news, views and interviews. But thank you very much for supporting the podcast throughout the course of this World Cup. We've got one final wrap up episode after the final, which will come out Monday morning, New Zealand time, around about lunchtime in India, and a little bit later in the day in the UK. So please do hit like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. That would be much appreciated, and share the podcast link with a friend, colleague or teammate. It is really helping to grow the little humble New Zealand cricket podcast that is the Top Order. But for now, it is good night and God bless. We'll speak to you soon. See you later.